Welcome to World Cinema Reviews. This is your host, Frank the Vamp. We're winding down Horror Month. We're in the last couple of days, and I want to go ahead and talk about a couple more movies before it ends. A movie that I recently watched was Contracted Phase Two. This is the sequel to the 2013, in a beautiful, awesome movie about body horror and so many, let's say, sexual responsibility, things that can go wrong with sex. Really, really, really interesting movie that had the protagonist played by Najara Townsend basically make some wrong choices and ended up having sex with somebody that had this horrible disease that basically had a horrible toll on her body and made her change into a new form. The movie, the part two, basically talks about the aftermath of her doings and what happens of this disease that can spread. And if you want to know, in detail how interesting and awesome, part one was, go ahead. I'll list in the description part one, the actual critic review that I did for part one, which I really, really enjoyed. It's one of my favorite movies of 2013. I really, really enjoyed it. I mean, and if you haven't seen it, I'm gonna tell you one thing. If you're squeamish, you're gonna have a hard time. There's another movie called Thanatomorphose, which is around the same, the same type of subject. I don't know. They came out around the same time, also. Really rough to watch. When it comes to if you're squeamish. So, but a brilliant movie anyway. So, part two. Is it as good? No, it's not. But is it worth watching? I would say yeah, especially if you've seen part one. So if you haven't seen part one, go watch part one and see my review. But if you're ready to watch part two, let's go. So part two basically follows, one of the characters from part one, which I'm going to try to be as abstract here, not naming who, because then I'm going to spoil the whole thing for you. So this is a spoiler-free review. So one of the characters that survives part one has sexual contact with the protagonist, and I'm not going to say what happened to the protagonist, but he's having this horrible, you know, symptoms of this horrible disease, and it's defined as a necrotic STD by one of the doctors. And if you watch this, you don't want that. This could be one of the either the strength or weaknesses of the second film. The first film is actually, a lot of the things are very implied, but there is a, don't get me wrong, there is a high gross factor, especially with some of the scenes with Samantha's. How can I say that? That's the protagonist's names. These vaginal discharges that may or may not contain maggots. Yeah, this is rough. Now the guy and other people that this film experienced some of the symptoms way more graphic. Even so, if you think that what I just mentioned is rough, part one, you haven't seen anything in part two. So if you like the gross factor, you like body horror, and you like very strong images, you're gonna love the film. If not, you might think that, and one of the things that I found to be not so great is that they use that sort of to pump, to kind of top part one, so they kind of include that, but there's less substance. I think the acting, some of the things, don't, how can I say, the acting is not as strong. I really like, the protagonist of part one being really, victimized. I didn't know what it was. In this one, we kind of knew what it is because we seen part one. So, acting not as strong. There's also some of the people that are there. The way that a doctor friend of this guy acts, and the sister, kind of really weird, and he kind of doesn't. This is written by the same guy, and you can see that he's following the idea, but it was directed by Joe Forbes, a different dude here. And I think there may have been some clash there. I don't know, I can't say that for sure, but I certainly did not like, the acting as strong. Also, the story, it's kind of repetitive of part one, but it does bring one more thing, which is, kind of goes into the Resident Evil category when he talks to when we see that the person introducing the disease, being somebody that wants to use this as a weapon. So use this disease as a weapon, and a weapon that may hurt more than one. I don't want to say the word, but you all know what I'm talking about. Is basically somebody that's trying to introduce this pandemic into the population, and it's really scary. And the person, so it's also kind of like a detective thing, weak acting by the detective too. I mean, it's just, the plot is so interesting and you're involved in it, but when you get weak performances, it's kind of hard to follow. It's that's the thing. I think it's John Ennis, Special Agent Dalton, um, and some of the and some of the other characters just not as good. Um, it's just it's just like I said, um, strong story, weak acting, and too much of a setup. It doesn't resolve a lot of the issues of part one. So since it truly picks up the first one ends, this one follows. So it's kind of like a two-part movie. One, it's one story, one, and the second one is way weaker because of the tough acting, and it's kind of stalling because this is not spoiler, but if you can see it in the internet, there's going to be a phase three. There's going to be a part three for this movie. So I would say, to sum it all up, um, strong images, uh, a lot of them for shock value, so that may or may not pump up the film. Very interesting story, but at the same time, it's kind of a mixed bag because it does have relatively weak acting, and it doesn't further the story enough. So I would say that if you are a fan of the first movie, this movie is a B minus. I gave the rating of A minus to B plus on the first one. This is a grade down, so this is a B minus to C plus category. So if you haven't seen part one, you probably give it a C plus, or you may think it's definitely. But I gotta say one thing though, it does pump you up to watch part three. You really want to know what happens in part three, and definitely I recommend you to see this. It's really, like I said, it follows the character, and there's a couple of things that are really, 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 really awesome. And yeah, that's my review. So if you like Contracted Part One and Two, you comment. If you like if you didn't like Part Two, you comment too. Hey, but all I want you to know is I want to get you to talk about it, and I really want you to see these two films. I think they're worth watching, and I think you should watch both. And subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. Thank you so much. You guys are awesome. I love you, my subscribers and new guys. Please subscribe to me. There's a lot of new content coming up. Take it easy. Be well. Stay cool. Take care.